Hello everyone. In this session, we are going to study advanced data management techniques. That is, how the data access will be provided to the users in the database, what all the different types, and how the data can be assigned, how the data access can be assigned to the users. For that, we'll start with the introduction. The access control is one of the most essential cybersecurity practice. Meticulous management of user access right help to ensure sensitive data and reduce the chance of a successful attack. However, choosing an access control model relevant to your organization can be tricky. This article discusses use cases for mandatory access control, discretionary access control, and role-based access control model. Means whatever the access provided to the user is broadly classified into the three categories. The first one is the mandatory access control method, the second is discretionary access control model, and the role based access control model. We will study one by one. First of all, the first method is the mandatory access control method. In this method, what actually happens is in mandatory access control is a model of access control where the operating system provides user with access based on the data confidentiality and user clearance level. In this model, access is granted on a need to know basis. User must prove their need for information before gaining access. Means when the user want any access, the user need to be request to the administrator, and based on their need, the administrator will provide the access to the user. The next point, the MAC is also called non-discretionary access control model, which means that the control isn't granted at the discretion of the user or file owner. The control mechanism of MAC model enable organization to implement zero trust principle. Means it non-discretionary access means the discretionary access type. Once we will study this method, then it will be clear that MAC is not a non-discretionary access control model. MAC is considered one of the most secure access control model. Access rule in this model are manually defined by the system administrator and strictly and strictly enforced by the operating system or system kernel security kernel. Regular users can't alter security attributes even for data have created. Means in this system, the operating system plays an important role. The administrator, with the help of block diagram, it will be more clear to us. Here, this is the block diagram for mandatory access control method, where the administrator is responsible for providing some information to the data and the user. First of all, administrator will provide the confidentiality level of the data to the database and the clearance level to the users, and gives the direction to the operating system. Based on the directions of the administrator, the operating system will provide the access to the data and decide on access based on classification in the category. Means which type of user, what is the classification of user, which category, which access is required. Everything will be decided by the operating system from the input of the administrator. And once the things are clear, that is the user classification and the user category, after that the operating system will provide the user based on classifications and the category. The basic principles of MAC are: the utmost privacy and confidentiality of the organization resource are paramount. No one has default privilege to access or edit someone's data. It means the data confidentiality and privacy to the organization are paramount. Means nobody is having the default privileges so that they can access all the information. Every user have the have the privileges with respect to uh, uh, their task, their work. that whatever the requirement of the authorization, whatever the requirement of the privileges need to given for a particular user, it will be decided, and only this particular information will be allowed for user to access, so that none of the user will have the default privileges. Access provisioning is centrally administrated. Centrally, all the database means access to the users will be provided centrally by the administrator. The next point is each individual and resource in the system has security tab with their classification and category. With Mac, the process of gaining access looks like this. The administrator configure access policies and defines security attributes, confidentiality level, and clearance for accessing different project and type of resource. The administrator assign a set of attributes to each object, user or resource that access data, and object, file, database, or port, whatever it may be, that will be decided by the with the help of requirement. The administrator will assign these attributes to the subject, that is nothing but the user. When subject attempts to access an object, means subject means user, when attempts to access an object, that is some of the authorization, when they wanted to access, the operating system examines the subject. The user's security will be examined by the operating system attributes and decide whether access can be granted or not. To obtain access to object, the user provide their credentials. Means when any user wants to get the access from the operating system, the user need to provide their credentials. The pros and cons of this method, that is mandatory access control method. The pros are high level of data protection is there in this method, and administrator define access to object and user can't alter that access. Granularity means an administrator set user access rights and object access parameter manually. Everything will be done manually based on the requirement of the user. The administrator will provide the access to the user manually. So granularity is one of the pros of this system. Immunity to Trojan horse attack. Users can't declassify data or share access to classified data. Means whatever the access the user is having, he can access that particular access only. Fewer errors means strict and constantly controlled policies helps reduce the system errors that lead to over privileged user. And strict division, admins divide user into subset and limit resource exposure for these subset using security attributes. Means in an organization, the multiple users with their different levels are there, and based on their levels, based on their authorization requirement, based on their subsets, the authorization will be divided into the subset, and that info then that authorization will be provided to the user. The cons of the method is complex maintenance, as we have to do as we have to perform all these operations of providing the authorization is manual, so the task is somewhat complex. Manual configuration of security levels and clearance require constant attention from the administrator. Means once the object will be assigned to the user will have the access of that, and once the user requires some more objects to perform, then the user will approach to the administrator, and based on the requirement, the approval, the administrator will provide the access to that particular users. And manual scalability, Mac doesn't scale automatically. New users and piece of data demand constant updates on objects and account configuration. As the things are manual, once a new user requests for the access based on their requirement, based on their level, the administrator will decide and it will provide the access to that particular user, and this complete task will be manual. So the manual scalability is one of the cons of the Mac method. Interference with workflow. Why is the interference? Because once a user requires some authorization from the administrator, the user need to request to the administrator. Administrator will check all the authorization. Administrator will check whether the user is um, re- is handling such kind of activities, whether the approvals are there, everything will be checked by the administrator and will provide the authorization to the user. So this complete task will have some time. So that's why the interference with workflow will be observed. This is one of the cons of the mac method. Users have to request access to each new piece of data. They can't configure access parameter for their own data. The next method for the access control that we are going to study is the discretionary access control method. In this model, what happened? The discretionary access control system is a system in which a user with access to certain level of data can give access to the same level of data to someone else based on their judgment and choice. Means once an administrator will provide some authorization to one of the user. The user is now capable of sharing their all rights, whatever the rights administrator has provided to the user. The user can share the rights to another user. Okay. The next point, the first access control list means when the administrator will provide the access to the user. At that time, the first access control list is made by the administration, but any access granted to someone by someone already on the list is hard to monitor. Okay, because when the levels are increased, administrator will provide the rights to user 1, user 1 provide to user 2, user 2 provide to user 3. Means it will be difficult to monitor when the levels are increased, hard to monitor, although the list can be checked, revised and update anytime by the administrator. Administrator is having capability of observing, monitoring, altering all the rights for the complete system, but it is difficult system and not the secure system. That is the method, discretionary access control. This process makes the flow of data much easier and lot more user friendly than any other system. But contrary to the flexibility it offers, this system is also less secure as the flow of information can't be administrated regularly. This is what the flow for the discretionary access control method, where the administrator will provide the rights to the user, and the user, whatever the rights administrator has provided to the user, he can give the rights to the visitors, and the visitors can share the rights to the other visitors or the users. Due to the less secure passage, this system offers a flow of information which make it unfit for organizations that require high level security of their data, such as in the field like medical, finance, military, government offices, where the security is the prime concern. We cannot make use of discretionary access control method in the database for these applications, because here the security is the prime concern. As in any other system, in the system also, whether to give access to data or not to an employee is decided by administrator only. An important point worth mentioning here again is that once the access is granted to user, only then they can give access to someone else, but they cannot give access to any of the data to which they do not have access. Whatever the access the user have, these access only can be shared to the another user. The as the method is not used in such kind of industries like medical, finance, military, government. So these method of discretionary access control is used in the organizations where high level security system is not needed, such as small startups, businesses, schools, coaching centers. It will be fine. The next and very important method is the role based access control. In the role-based access control method ensures that only authorized users can access object and perform operations. Role-based access control is defined as a set of rules that governs and restrict user access to operations and objects based on their identity, instant, and session attributes. With the access control market growing to $12.8 billion by 2025, this technology will be increasingly important for enterprise security. Okay, role based access control is the widely used technique for providing the access. In this method, the roles are created, whatever it will be more clear based on the uh, block diagram that we are going to study. See the block diagram here. In the organization, we have the different levels, we have the different departments: HR, payroll, sales, finance, and IT sectors. In every department, they have their different roles. In the role based architecture, that is role access method, we are creating the roles for the different departments. For finance role, general role, payroll, IT role, HR role, and sales role. And after creating the role, the users can be segregated with their requirement of the role. Suppose the HR, a person is belonging from the HR department, should have the role of HR, that is HR role, and the general role where the information is general. So these two roles should be assigned to the HR department. Here in the diagram, we can observe that all the users, all type of users having the same role, that is general role, is assigned to all of them, and the other roles based on the requirement it is provided. Suppose the payroll, so for payroll, the payroll role is assigned as well as the general role. In the sales, general role as well as the sales related roles will be assigned to the sales person. And the finance role should be assigned as well as the general role. And in the IT sector, the IT should have the general role as well as the IT role. Also, the general role, where all the departments users are having the access, should have the email access. Means email is used by all of them, that's why the general role where the application is email will be provided to all the users. Whereas the finance role is related to the database, so the customer database will be provided to the finance role, will have the access of. This is what the access to the various roles, such as the payroll. So payroll should have the time records, whatever the HR related, the time of the employee will be recorded, and it should be accessible to the payroll as well as the employee record. Both the details should be with the payroll department. IT role should have the data centers. HR role should have time records, so that the HR will came to know that how many employees are sitting in for how much time in the organization, so that the time records will be access will be given to the HR role. As well as the sales role. Sales role should have the access of SAP, okay, as well as the customer database, SAP systems, applications, and products for data processing, the SAP ERP. Okay, it comes into the sales role. So sales role should have I mean, these are the resources available for this particular role. Okay, now we have started with the role based access. Here, the role based access control is a set of rules that govern and restrict user access to operation and object based on their identity, intent, and session attributes. Based on all these things, we are creating the role and providing the role to the respective department. According to US National Institute of Standard Technology, the concept was formed in 1992 by the information security researchers. Today, role-based access control is among the most popular access control mechanism due to its cost, advantages, versatility, and the efficiency. The role-based access control is a method for managing access to computer or network resource based on users' role within the organization. So role-based access assign one or more roles to each user and give each role different permission, restriction, what user can do with a company's IT system, also known as this method is also known as the role-based security. Role-based access control is a simple and manageable approach to access management that's less prone to error than assigning permissions to user individually. For example, in a medical setting, you could assign a role to doctor, nurse, and lab technician. Okay, this with the help of example it will be more clear that how the role based access control method is used. This will be clear with the help of example. Here we are considering the case of a hospital where the different employees with the doctors and the nurse and um the doctor and the lab technician will have the different accesses. So you can assign a role to doctor, nurse, and lab technician and then map individual users into those roles. Doctors could have the ability to write and read orders. The orders will be read and write by the doctor. So, read and write order role should be assigned to the doctor. The nurse could read orders and labs. The nurse can only read but not write. So, only read access need to be given to the nurse based on the requirement, and lab technician could write and read labs. Okay, so based on their requirement, based on their levels, the individual role will be created and will be assigned to that particular user. Now the challenges of the role based access control, what are the challenges the role based access control is having? Like most thing that IT admin have to manage, there are some well documented challenges to role based access control. Following are the challenges. We can see that lack of standard definitions means the roles will be created for the various departments, but based on the department we cannot segregate the roles. There are various criteria, there are various levels, so it will be difficult to define all the roles. Next is the role is a new parameter, means every time or first time we have to create the role. So role creation of a role is one of the new parameter that need to be defined, is one of the challenge in the role based access architecture. Then avoiding access uh, permissioning. Here the very important thing is once the roles are created and it is assigned to the user, none of the users should have the more access. Based on the requirement only the access need to be given. If the extra access will be given to that particular user, then it will cause the problem. That's why the extra access permissioning should be avoided. This is one of the this is one of the biggest challenge that will be faced by the role based access control method. And achieving RBAC at scale means once the size of the organization is increased, once the roles will be assigned to the multiple users and the users are increased at that time at scale, it will be difficult to manage this role based access control method. So, this is what we have studied in the advanced database management techniques. Thank you so much.